So welcome everyone to our webinar today. We're going to talk about cross-border blockchain operations between Europe and Asia. I'm your host, Tim Bailey, today, and I'll be moderating this panel. I'm with Red Date Technology and responsible for the international business for Red Date. So let's get into the topic today. Due to their unique features, blockchains exist in a variety of different forms and structures. Differences can be seen in degrees in terms of decentralization, consensus processes, and scaling solutions, just to name a few. All these differences make it extremely difficult to transfer data and assets between blockchains and can delay the massive adoption of blockchain technology. Therefore, unified blockchain standards with respect to interoperability, governance, data safety, and many other aspects are needed for the industry in order for blockchain to really grow into the mainstream. In light of global blockchain-based services, cross-border services will require standardized frameworks to handle regulatory and operational compliant microservices. Different macro-regional distributed infrastructures are forming in Europe, in Asia, and in South America. Today at the European Blockchain Association, we've invited speakers from EBSI, so the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure, and BSN, the blockchain-based service network, to discuss how different clients and applications can integrate seamless cross-border services to and from Europe and Asia. So I'd like to now have each of the panelists introduce themselves and a little bit about their background. Maxine, let me start with you.
Thank you, Tim. So I'm Maxine Lem. I work at the European Commission's Director General for Informatics, DG Digit, as it is known. DG Digit is the IT department of the European Commission as an institution, but myself and Joao, who's my head of sector, actually work in a unit that is specialized in providing services outside of the European Commission, so to the member states. And as part of that work, we are helping build the European blockchain services infrastructure. And I'm here today to comment particularly on the regulatory aspects. I'm not a lawyer, but this is the implementation side of the work that I've been focusing on.
Great. Joao, could you introduce yourself?
Good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for having us. My name is João Rodrigues Frade. I also come from DG for Informatics of the European Commission. What is important to highlight, of course, is that the European Commission is a very large organization, and Maxine and I, we are on the side of the implementation of the European blockchain services infrastructure. So we don't do policy. We can talk a bit about it, but our goal and focus today is to explain the implementation side of EBSI and how we are working with all European member states, actually using it for verification of information, using verifiable credentials. So that's currently our main focus. Thank you for having us here today, and we hope that we can explain how EBSI is being used in Europe, for the moment not yet in production, but close to it, for the purposes of verification of information.
Okay. Great, thank you. Pedro?
Good morning, team and all. Thank you very much for having me today. My name is Pedro Lopez Belmonte. I work as Web3 and Technology Innovation Senior Manager at Richmond Group. And I'm a blockchain expert since a few years, working on the technology, on the different aspects. And I'm here today to speak about the different regions, how they approach blockchain, and what are the implications on different aspects, mainly assets and identity.
Great. Thank you. Peter?
Hi, thank you. And hi, everyone. My name is Peter Wong. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Panellists. So Panellists is a company that looks at, in the healthcare space, how we can provide more affordable and accessible healthcare services for individuals at home, especially at home services. We see healthcare space being very centralized but also dysfunctional across the board, across the globe. And so we're offering these digital services and healthcare products. And one of the key questions we want to look at, that we've been looking at this year, is how we can give data ownership back to the users. So instead of a centralized data processor, we want to actually allow users to control their data from a security and privacy standpoint. And as you mentioned, also things like distributed identity and verifiable credentials are things that we want to actually be able to implement as a chain of trust from our laboratory all the way to, say, hospitals and clinics for test results and things like that. So we are looking into delivering an end-to-end health ecosystem to provide diagnostic, prevention, and personalized healthcare.
Thank you. Yifan.
Hi, my name is Yifan He. I'm the CEO and the founder of Ready Technology. So Tim is my colleague. And we are basically one of the founding members of the blockchain-based service network project from China. And we also in the the implementation side of the project. So we are in charge of the developing and the deploying, and also do the daily maintenance of BSN infrastructure. So the way we promote BSN, actually, we the big idea for us to promote is what we call actually a public IT system. It's compared to all the system, centralized system in the world, we call them private IT system. So we think the best way for user to control their own data is always resident in a public IT system, because how you store your data is where to store that. If you can build a personal database on AWS, put all your data there, ask all the websites to do that, but AWS is still a private IT system. So they can still shut you down, still can delay you or deny the access. So what we're trying to do is to build a public environment. So based on blockchain technology today, so everybody can put their data there, and to be the safest place to store personal data. So it's not really only how to store the SSIs, but also where to store those identities. Thank you.
Good. Well, welcome everyone to the panel today. Let's get into it here. So blockchain as a technology is still, I would say, at an early stage. And while there are many industries and developers that have embraced the technology, many people are still confused about, how they can get involved in blockchain. What is the relationship between blockchain technology and cryptocurrency? So maybe let me start with Pedro. What's the status quo of blockchain implementation in Europe, where you're working today?
Yes, that's an interesting question. I think it varies. The answer is different depending on who you ask, right? For those who have been included or working on this technology since already a few years, clearly we have the impression that the technology is already mature, while others see it as a very, very young technology. If you look, for example, at the latest edition of the Gartner quadrant for Web3 and blockchain, clearly their perspective is that there's still a long way to go till we reach a level of full maturity of the technology. I agree with that perspective, but I think we have already reached a level where the value of blockchain and the relevance in all aspects, it's already proven. It's not a question of if blockchain is going to bring value. The question now is how can we move ahead with it? What are the main use cases that we should focus on? And I think now we are in this point of inflection where we need basically to move ahead and to implement blockchain at a scale in the corporate and the institutional world. We need clear regulations, not only in Europe but globally. And we also need resources. We need more knowledge coming into the ecosystem. We need more specialists and more people with knowledge that can support all these initiatives that we are working on and that we will work in the future. That would be a bit my impression right now.
Okay. Well, let's see if your fellow European colleagues have anything to add. Maxine or Joao, did you have anything that you would add to what Pedro had to say?
Well, I agree in general, of course. We are trying to use blockchain for the public sector. So this is why EBSI, I believe, is directed to value to the citizens in general. We want to use blockchain, and we are already using it to support the verification of information. So the idea of the use cases in our context is quite clear, is that everyone knows the rise of fake information, misinformation, and all the information is going online. So nowadays, I think this challenge of verification is becoming really apparent, and people start to understand that it's not only about exchanging information, but it's also about verifying the information. Because at some point was all about how can we access information, then it was how can we exchange information. I think today is really how can we verify the information in a very convenient way and also open way. We believe that blockchain can support the kind of resolution of this problem online and also in face-to-face situations, because we are using more and more this idea of the digital wallet that is with us every day. So what we try to do in the European blockchain services infrastructure, and everything is online, is to address simple situations of everyday life. So you have a diploma, you go to the institution that issues the diploma, you request that diploma, and when the diploma is issued, will be issued in a verifiable format with W3C verifiable credentials. When you present that diploma, blockchain will be used to ensure that the issuer is trusted and will provide that assurance to the verifier, and the verifier can be anyone. It just needs to have access to the internet. You will know that the issuer can be trusted. The blockchain in our case does not contain any personal data, so the diploma is not on the blockchain. The diploma is stored on a digital wallet. The information about you is on the digital wallet. The only thing that the blockchain holds is the information about the issuer and the accreditation of the issuer by an institution such as the Ministry of Education of that member state, or let's say, in the case of pharma, could be the lab that approved that, can be anything that you come up with. So there's always a chain of trust, and we can use blockchain to replicate the chain of trust of issuers of, let's say, education, but any other sector that comes to your mind. And we are currently really believing that this will be a game changer at some point. Maybe Maxine,
one quick follow-up question would be not everyone in the audience will be familiar with EBSI, and maybe you could give kind of a high-level overview of what it is. Is it only government service or public service? Is it also commercial focused? What are the technologies and protocols involved? Maybe just a quick background on EBSI would be helpful, because I think at BSN, we're often asked, oh, how does BSN compare to EBSI? So maybe a little background there.
I'll let Maxine give you the background in terms of the institutional background, and then on the technology, I can give you a quick overview of how we are implementing it.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Joao. Yes, so maybe tying in with your previous question, I think the main thing when it comes to blockchain from a public sector perspective, how it can be leveraged is that it's a solution in search of a problem. And so we looked at the key inherent characteristics of blockchain, which are its immutability, its tamper evidence, and we thought, okay, well, this can then be used for verification. And together, the European Commission, together with what is called the European Blockchain Partnership, which is an alliance of the 27 European Union member states plus 3, Norway, Liechtenstein, and Ukraine as observer, came together in 2019 and formed this alliance with a series of domains called use cases that we seek to develop together. And so this governance structure, this joint governance structure between the European Commission and the European Blockchain Partnership is steering the entire initiative. So to be very, very concrete, the major outputs of this work so far are 2 major components, right? On the one hand, we are developing the software in order for the member countries to host a node that forms the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure network. So that network is the canonical EBSI network, and on top of this, we are developing business use cases. So how can we use this network and its APIs in order to perform verification operations and within a certain domain? And on that front, we are doing 2 types of work. We're doing specifications work, and we're doing, let's say, market and ecosystem stimulation work. So for that, I think I'll let Joao fill in the gaps.
Very quickly, so we have an EBSI node, right? Provided as software that the member states can use. This EBSI node is an implementation of Hyperledger Bezo. And then that node exposes a number of APIs, which are completely agnostic to the underpinning blockchain. And those APIs is what I just said, is the way for a verifier, for example, to understand, okay, is this issuer accredited, by a trusted organization? So the API allows the interaction between issuer applications, digital wallets, and verification applications. So we just expose APIs that are then consumed. It's important to notice that the blockchain is public permission, so the information there can be read by anyone, but only a few can write. So those that are, let's say, supposed to be writing on the blockchain can do it. And this is why it becomes very fit to this type of the issuing and then verification by anyone, because the verifier will have access to all the information it needs publicly without needing to contact any third party. So it becomes a very straight line type of approach.
And it's my understanding that the EBSI is almost exclusively focused on government or public services. Is that correct? Not commercial?
Well, the first implementations, because the funding is public and because, as Maxine explained, the main drivers are coming from the public sector, are you can call them, but they're not really, let's say, public sector only, right? The verifier can be a private company. You are recruiting someone, you want to verify the diploma. So essentially, those entities will be from the private sector. Also, the digital wallets that we are discussing here come from the private sector. We just do a conformance testing on them. But essentially, the nodes are driven by public sector entities, and the use cases that we are currently focusing on are mostly chosen by this entity called ABP together with the European Commission, which are of public interest, not necessarily public sector only, but we know that education, and we're talking about the big skills agenda of the Union, is an important element for the future, that the problem of verification of education credentials has not been solved. So why not, and it's also very telling because we are mostly focusing on cross-border use cases. And so diploma is issued on member state A, verified in member state B. And that is also the reason why we want to promote mobility in the single market by making it possible for all this type of information to be verified across the member states. So this idea of wide interoperability across the member states, and then empower the citizen, give him, her control over the information. So those things are all coming together in EBSI, and this is why I think that it's a great example for blockchain technology, but without necessarily calling it, a blockchain only. It's an orchestration of technologies, an orchestration of standards. I think this is quite important and interesting.
Got it.
And maybe I would drop the dichotomy between what we call public and commercial, because at the end of the day, like João mentioned, the fundamental work of that we're doing is trying to support a more integrated single market within the European Union. And this project is just one of many ways in order to tackle that. So while we pursue use cases that are in the public interest, it is not something that will be exclusively consumed by public administrations.
Got it. Understood. Let's shift over to Asia. Peter, a similar question to what I asked Pedro at the beginning, which was, can you talk a little bit more about the status quo of blockchain technology implementation in Asia and other markets where Prenetics is involved?
Okay, thank you. So from the industry, from the sector in healthcare, where Prenetics stands, we're really looking at the blockchain technology more holistically. Right now, there is some work going on in terms of trying to integrate in using the blockchain technology across the globe. But I do think that in our region currently, that we haven't been able to see the uptake for that technology to really become mainstream. And I think if you look at one of the use cases we were looking into at Prenetics was, so in traditional Web 2 scenario, data will be stored and passed on to your data controller and your processor, and they will then, and you trust them to secure and enable your data to be continue with integrity. However, what we also see is this does not have to be the case, especially when we talk about can they do medical tests and health tests, go into a medical professional or seek medical device from anonymously. So can you actually seek to get those information anonymously? Say, so one of the products we sell, for example, we offer is a DNA test. We also offer at-home blood tests to look at food sensitivity, heart health. We have DNA test that offers actionable insights to our customers. Over 500 reports from diet, nutrition, to pharmacogenomics, your drug sensitivity, to your cancer risks and carrier risks, and serious diseases. So I think when an individual wants to do this kind of work, to get this kind of information themselves instead of going to a hospital, do a health check, they might not necessarily want to give all that information, like the PII, basically, to the company, to the laboratory. And so one of our use cases is looking at, can we allow our user to do this anonymously through PKI, basically, cryptography. So we actually looked at this use case together with BSN. Right on, and look at how we can offer this by putting up basically using ID to exchange information, but also using keys. Using PKI, you get a session key to exchange with the lab, and you can send details across only relevant information. For example, the number of the kit you're using to do your to swap your DNA sample. And then when you get your results, again, that will be encrypted using your public key. And the idea is that getting that information, you can actually store that information also off-chain encrypted on a distributed file system like IPFS, for example, where that becomes possible, and when we put the content address onto the chain encrypted. And the idea, by doing that, then the individual has the data, medical data, genomics data of themselves. They then have absolute control of what they can do with that data, be it they want to share part of it to a healthcare professional or to the airport in the case of a COVID test, for example. So there are actually a lot of use cases where we see where the blockchain technology can be utilized quite heavily. What we do see currently, the lacking is actually usability from a user perspective. Is that an individual user currently using blockchain, really looking at, I mean, if we know the most common use cases in cryptocurrency, right. Not really in utility or in the healthcare sector. I think there is some work that needs to be done to bridge that gap to say, hey, actually, blockchain is not just about cryptocurrency. Blockchain as this distributed ledger can actually be a technology that can be used for as what we're saying here in for your distributed identity, right? If you look at electronic health record, that's really what it is, right? Some of that is actually how can I verify? How can I have that piece of information verified without a doubt? Bridging that chain of trust from whoever is actually issuing that to whoever is actually verifying it. So that's where I think the user interface or the usability needs quite a bit of improvement. And secondly, of course, what we hear is that there are a lot of blockchains implementation out there. A lot of people setting up nodes, and obviously, BSN has a network of blockchains, and then we also have European Commissions having that with the member states. So, and of course, there are also other public chains out there as well. What I'm seeing is from a user, if you will, perspective is how do we bring in an open standard, perhaps, to be able to breach all of these chains for better interoperability. A little bit, if you look at healthcare, for example, a little bit about HL7, for example, or the FIA standard, where you can exchange health data format in a more interoperable ways between entities.
Good. Yifan, thank you, Peter. Yifan, from a looking at what's going on in Asia, what would anything else you would add about blockchain implementation here in the region?
Okay. First, I totally agree with Petro. The blockchain technology, the concept is already proven, so it's no doubt about that. But as probably Peter knows, I really don't like blockchain technology. Okay, I think it's way too early, and it's specifically designed to issue and trading cryptocurrencies. So basically, right now, the whole blockchain technology is a big ledger. That's basically a decentralized banking system. So which means it's used to just manage the wallets and the personal accounts. So when the transfers and the balancing in those wallets can be safe, can be safeguarded by hundreds, thousands of people together. That's why you need a big ledger. But for other business scenarios, you don't always need a big ledger. Everybody store the data together. It's very awkward, and so that's why the main mission of BSN project is to bring blockchain technology beyond cryptocurrency to all IT industries. So that means currently, probably next 3 years, we actually focus on the modifying the blockchain technology. So the first thing, actually, we just launched the Spartan Network, BSN Spartan Network. The modification was to take out the cryptocurrency from layer 1. So then it become a fixed gas fee, very, very cheap, very, very low cost. Then everybody contributes some resources from the Spartan Network as a decentralized traditional cloud kind of infrastructure. Then the next step, we probably even, modify the consensus, make that private consensus become possible. Then goes to, how to modify even to build this kind of private consensus across chains. You can build part of the nodes on different chain and still form your own, a consensus. So then also the DID is always a key, because we believe it's like the fundamental function. Any application deployed in this kind of decentralized environment, you need a DID system to support that, to support how to, basically manage users. Then we also, working with some major communication, the carriers in China, China Mobile, China some other carriers outside China, we try to, even, link the DID on blockchain back to the phone, so they can use the SIM card as a wallet or the phone as a wallet. Then we also has a third party, it's called a data hub. This data hub, user basically can install into their own environment, a decentralized environment or centralized environment. We don't really care. Then they have phone, they have DID on public chains or non-cryptocurrency public chains, and a data hub somewhere, in some environment, which inside this data hub, they basically install all kind of data, because we don't know what kind of data is there, right? Could be medical records, very complicated medical records, all kind of, X-ray, stuff. So they need a data hub somewhere. So link them all together becomes that kind of infrastructure. So we are still doing research and working on that. So that means when I think the blockchain technology will become mature is when we don't call them blockchain or ledgers, then they will become much mature.
Yeah. Right. Okay, great. Let's everyone's touched a little bit on standards. So let's talk about that. Pedro, I'm going to shift to you and get your view on, what types of standards exist in the blockchain world today, and then, more importantly, what should we be looking at, or what should the industry be working together on to develop in the future?
So I think the main standards today are the standards of the underlying assets being managed in blockchain, whether it's crypto or they are non-fungible assets. I think that's already been tackled, at least initially, and I think is working. Right? We have in Ethereum the main base of standards with the ERC20 for cryptocurrencies and the ERC 721 for non-fungible tokens or non-fungible assets. I think that's already working. As I said, probably it requires more development, but I think what we should be looking at now is at identities. Right. Essentially, if we think about what are the elements of blockchain, whether if we manage crypto or other type of assets, we basically manage assets, and we basically manage the relationship of these assets with their owners, with the chain of trust. Right. How the asset is moving from one owner to another, and I think the identity part. It's probably it has been overlooked and simplified. If we think about that today, a lot of people call identities to wallets, or called identities to NFTs, especially since last year, and with some very prominent projects like Bored Ape Yacht Club. Or these blockchain addresses like ENS or unstoppable domains. From my perspective, first of all, these are just aspects or representations of, or can be as representations of our identity, but they are not our identity, and they are just different ways of representing our identity, but disconnected. If we really drill down on these aspects, we probably don't have their privacy. We probably don't have their regulatory recognition. So basically, with these elements today, I cannot go to my government and present my taxes. Mostly, there are some regions in the world, like some villages in Switzerland, that you can do that allow you to do that. But in essence, we cannot interact in a mainstream way with these identities today. So from my point of view, what is missing is the regulatory part. And I think this is going to carry on with adoption. We were speaking before about an inflection point. I think once the regulations start to recognize and start to deliver standards on this sense, not only governments but corporations will feel more comfortable to get into the wagon and to go deeper into the implementation of these aspects, right? I've been working for the past 3 years with the Spanish government, with the Standards Office on a personal capacity. We developed and presented a decentralized identity management model based on blockchain and DLT. We issued the first reference framework. This is a start. This is now being looked in Europe by Germany. And I think all these aspects, at the end of the day, are going to be the glue that ties all these forms of identities that I spoke before together. And in a way, I'm expecting this to be portable somehow to the different geographic locations, and hopefully we'll find a way to make it compatible with the different regulatory frameworks that will arise.
Maxine or Jawad, did you have anything to add to that from a European perspective on standards? I know you're more focused on implementation, but are there areas?
I can take a step, maybe a step back on what was discussed, because if I look at what we are trying to achieve in EBSI and why do we use blockchain in the first place, because that was a bit the discussion here, is do we need a blockchain? And indeed, there are alternatives to blockchain technology, but if you think about what we are trying to achieve and the scope that we are trying to focus on, which is this idea, issuers are legal entities. Legal entities don't have the same GDPR, let's say, challenges as information about a natural person. So just that challenge of saying, can I trust this issuer, and is this issuer accredited across borders in a landmass as Europe, right, with all these different legislations? So if we are able to find a sweet spot where we are providing value at the same time using blockchain with a reasonable scope where it can work, I'm a believer that blockchain is not the only solution, but definitely at a level of maturity that it can be used for that purpose. So this is why we look at blockchain as allowing us to achieve and to solve a problem, and not trying to use blockchain as a solution for a problem that we don't know. And this is, I think, one of the main differentiators of EBSI, is that we really are problem driven. And this is why we only put information about issuers. That information is absolutely under the control of those issuers. Of course, it's a band only, but it doesn't really, let's say, become a problem for them. And at the same time, it allows the information to be verified across 27 different member states in real time. So if you think about it, well, if this happens without any centralized database, without requiring, and can scale to any sector, well, I think blockchain has provided quite some value. Now, on the European Commission side, there is also work with all the different, I'm not going to name any of them because otherwise I would eventually miss one of them, but we are currently contributing with our experience to the most, let's say, known standardization efforts and entities that are currently working on that. And, the usual suspects come to your mind. And of course, we are working with them. But also all the information that we are, let's say, working on is available online. So we indirectly or directly contribute to many others that we don't know. And of course, we work at these two levels, the blockchain level, and then on the verifiable credentials level. And we try to be very clear about the standards that we use, about the limitations, about how do we solve them. And so if you go online, you see our deed methods. We have one deed method for natural persons. We have one deed method for legal persons, or let's say issuers. Why do we have that? Because of the GDPR concerns. If you look at our profile of verifiable credentials, I mean, it's full of information that we believe that will contribute to more interoperability within Europe, but even beyond. So I invite everyone to have a look and also to contact us in case more information is needed.
Great. Ifan, can you talk a little bit about, sorry.
Tim, I just want to point out, if I may, I find very interesting what Joao just explained, and you know, I support it very much, and I want to illustrate with a short sample why these efforts like EBSI and you know, other public or semi-public entities are important. Today, for example, ENS, Ethereum Name Service, is very popular. You know, you can go there as an individual or as an institution or corporation and purchase what it's called a blockchain domain, basically a readable way to link your wallet address, right? The problem is that in today's inception of this service is basically the Wild Wild West, and we are seeing the same issue that we saw many years ago with the internet domains. Any individual can purchase a domain that is not representing himself, but maybe a brand or a corporation, and then you have a kind of captive situation where, in this case, as it's fully decentralized, the only way for the rightful owner of that name is basically to pay the person that registered it, right? So as I said, it's the Wild Wild West. I think this illustrates why sometimes we are using, especially on private initiatives, where this technology is being used in a way that institutions can support. You know, with the support of an institution like EBSI, I think we can try to fix these problems. Not only from GPDR perspective, you know, but from ownership and transparency perspective. So, you know, very much aligned with you on this case.
Ifan, can you talk a little bit about your views on, you know, the role of standards in the future in blockchain technology?
Okay, like I said, you know, I don't even believe the blockchain technology will exist in the next 3 years. Okay, they will totally change. So personally, I don't think there's a standard, because right now, any standard probably, why I only call them cryptocurrency standard. It's not really as a fundamental. But I want to emphasize the W3C standard is actually now is basically widely used. Even we, you know, when we build our DID system in China, outside China, we actually always comply with W3C standards. So I think that one is pretty mature and you know, fully supported by almost all developers. I never saw a second possibility even out. So I think that one, but it's a very fundamental you know, a standard. That's actually what I think a standard should be. It should even beneath the legislation, you know, which means, you know, you can use this standard to be compliant with some regulations, but it also, you know, move to another country with different set of regulation, you still can modify and to be compliant. So W3C is a technical standard. Okay, there's no you know, you can just implement any way you want, but the structure is the same. Issuer, verifier, you know, it's basically works the same. I think that standard is the only standard I think will exist in next 10 years. You know, from the blockchain system. But right now there's for cryptocurrency, this application. There's of course a lot of standards there. You know, that's how they build the interoperability among that. The big exchange can move, you know, crypto around. There's a lot of standards there, but I think it's too narrow and focus on the, you know, the basically the cryptocurrencies. It's really hard to move those things to, you know, for example, medical industry. You know, it's then immediately everything, nothing is really works. So I think we still have a long way to go.
So Peter, Ifan mentioned the medical industry. So I'm going to, as someone who's actively engaged in medical services and technology, I'm going to give you the last word here on what you see as the role of standards and what you'd like to see in the future.
So one of the key things, the use case we were doing in terms of testing and providing the end-to-end, so the mission to provide this end-to-end health ecosystem, I think there's a lot to said about using blockchain technology if there is a standard that we can actually leverage on to establish properties like data provenance across the surfaces, across regions, domains. And I think also having in a healthcare space is also understanding how we, as I mentioned before, how we increase that usability. And I think that's the question where we're asking, is this something we can actually make it more we make it more into a standard where there is actually certain ways of usage of this technology, because currently most of that interface and standards are on implementations on how to build. But I think I see that also with the different blockchains out there. There are different ways to integrate with them, and I mean, you can think about it. There are even bridges to talk about between blockchains so that they can actually communicate, just so that they can communicate with each other. So for users like us building applications on top, such as smart contracts and things alike, then there really should be. So obviously, with the standard with Ethereum, there is already one way of doing smart contract, but we also know that it's not the only way to implement smart contract, at least, or if it's on blockchain that is not Ethereum. There are other ways to do that, and there are other blockchains implementation which support this type of contract, smart contract, verifiable smart contract to be deployed on the chains. So there are still a lot of different ways as user, if you will, as healthcare service providers, to be able to make use of this technology to give data, the control back to the user. But then if you lift that one level up, then it is to the end user. So the end user who wants to use our products, who wants to actually get more insights about their health and to get tested and to get treatments, then the question is down to how can they get a better understanding if we are using blockchain technology? How do they get a better understanding what that means to them, right? And how that can be more. I think that comes down to education also, in terms of how the users would know and the customers would know what this means to them, and you could offer the same product and services in a Web 2 scenario versus a Web 3 scenario, and then the question is, why would I want to choose one over the other? Giving users more options, on you can do this, you can do the same tests, but you get a different access to the data and control of the data at the end. And also then comes down to it is if we do get enough of a critical mass of users starting to choose the Web3 route to get their data onto, or the proof of the data onto the chain, then you can think about this as an aggregate where we can even increase the possibility of doing research, where users have the right to say, oh, I'm going to give this piece of information for research. I don't have to give everything. I can give this piece of information for research, or only this type of information from our 500 reports to the clinics for medical use. And I think that use case is quite important. But again, all these use cases that I'm talking about doesn't really, from a healthcare perspective, doesn't really have a standard. I mean, there are authorized electronic health record sharing in the Web 2 space, but it's not something that we can directly translate into Web 3 space. And I think there is a lot more opportunity there for that. And when you go into Web 3, actually, even beyond blockchain, or how Web 3 is going to use blockchain as a bedrock, then you can think about it as, hey, how can I provide telehealth consultation or virtual consultation across into regions which are physically less accessible, for example, into places where individual would not be able to get direct medical care as quickly as or as efficiently as they would like. So these are all avenues, I would say, where from a healthcare space, where blockchain, I think there is a lot of standards we should look at.
Good, very good. Well, we're out of time today. I want to thank everyone on the panel today for your insights on what's going on with blockchain in Europe and in Asia. I think our audience will have learned a lot from the session today. So thanks everyone for participating, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.